Black Compass Media, back live with another one. Shout out to the people that's out there right now. Tone Bro checking in. Salute to everybody, man. Hope y'all staying safe, staying active, staying vigilant, things like that. Political Bro Show, episode 2. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to all the people who's been hitting me up about the shows and stuff like that, different topics and things you want to add and things like that. So make sure y'all can hear me. I'm relying on the chat to make sure the audio quality is where it needs to be and things like that. And make sure you subscribe to us at the Black Compass Media, DA Black Compass on Twitter. Also go to Patreon for extended clips, battle rap, talk, hip hop, things of that nature. We kind of cover the gamut here. One of the things that we like to do here too is talk about politics. That's a passion of mine. I'm probably as passionate about battle rap as I am about, politics, right? I think that's important. This is live, by the way. Shout out to Nigel. This is definitely live. And we'll give you guys an opportunity to log in, to give your opinion, give your perspective. All perspectives here are welcome too. I want to make that abundantly clear because I think sometimes people get that misconstrued with us. Like, you don't have to agree with me at all. As a matter of fact, I would love for, if somebody really did have a disagreement with something that was said here, if there's expertise in various fields, I would like for you guys to come up as well. We're gonna have a whole situation here, right? So the lead in here, we're gonna talk a little bit about what's going on currently. Also have my man Alex Avalon is going to come up. He's a litigator, associate litigator here in the Brooklyn area. So he's going to be able to give us some really good perspective as well. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce him very soon. But I want to get to a couple things. And by the way, I see my man William in here. William, shout out to William Burney. We are talking about battle rap. Right after this, we got a DNA interview coming up on the bar show with Polo. So there will be battle rap covered, brother. We're gonna cover battle rap. Nigel, my man right here. Nigel, you're a funny man, but Trump is out of office already. Why are we still talking about politics, Tone? I thought the political energy died when Trump left, Tone. What are we doing this for, Tone? No. Many of us are into politics before Trump came, and many got, an awakening after Trump. I don't judge anybody for that at all. I tend to think whatever gets you into politics is fine. But we won't stop. We'll always hold accountable our people. We'll always hold power accountable. It's about accountability. You want my honest opinion? I am not thrilled with Joe Biden so far. I'm not thrilled. And I will give you the reasons why I'm not thrilled. First of all, I feel like we continue to, and this is a problem that I have with my side being the progressive side of the aisle. Some people think I'm a Democrat, like lifelong Democrat. I'm not. But the progressive side of the aisle, for me, the problem that I have is that we renege on everything. We concede too much. We give up too much. We abdicate. We in the name of, I guess, compromise and things like that, which is not a bad thing, compromise itself. But you got to remember who got you there. It was black and brown people in those minority epicenters, the Atlantas, the Milwaukees, the Philadelphias, the people that came out in record numbers, the people like Stacey Abrams that really helped to transform the demographics there to the voting populace, right, for black people. And I got to salute black women because they were on the forefront of that, right? With everything that was at stake, with everything that was in play for this cycle, our people turned out. And it's time to give us our things. That's what I think. Because I look over at the other side, the side that I didn't vote for, right? The guys who really celebrated Trump when he was kicking up, they were happy. I'm not that happy. I'm not happy right now. I want to be as happy as they were because they seemed like they were getting the things that they wanted. So I'm not too thrilled. The things that we have gotten so far, host of executive actions, pretty much reversing a lot of the Trump era policies on immigration, interior enforcement. The one good thing about the environmental executive order, which is something I've always kind of thought about, was like it really looks at the areas that are most affected by the deregulation and the policies that were set forth in the Trump administration, right? So you hear like buzzwords, and I try to avoid buzzwords without defining them, but like the idea of environmental racism, right? That was started. Ben Chavis, civil rights icon, was a big proponent of trying to figure that out, right? So whether you see landfills or nuclear plants being built close to the neighborhood, or just things not being up to code, the Flint water crisis being a key example in our generation of seeing something like that, right? So one of the policies that was enacted was to go after those areas that were suffering the most, right? And I think that's very, very important. Joe Biden is probably due for an infrastructure bill. COVID aside, no COVID, is very likely we'd have an infrastructure bill on the table already ready to go. But can't get there now without solving this current problem. But in that infrastructure bill, there needs to be focus on where the people live, right? Where the black and brown people live, where the people most affected by crumbling infrastructure live, right? Because that's where the benefit is, in my opinion. Now, yes, it has only been 2 months in office, but I just don't like what I'm hearing. It seems like we're reneging on student loan forgiveness. Like, we're not going to go as big on some of the healthcare reform measures that we need. We're not going to go as big on the living wage, the minimum wage efforts that were sort of put in place, right? And there's only so much you could do on the federal level, but I think that really does set the tone for the states. Got a first donation here from Darren Dio. Bro Cell need that fro needs work. Salute to the fro. Agree, Uncle Joe, and acting like a typical politician. Black folks need them promises honored. That's a fact. I mean, lest we remind him why he's in office and who put him there. There's no reason. There's no reason to renege on things so early, in my opinion. But I know that the focus has to be on COVID to get everything going back again, right? So, and just a quick thing on just Joe Biden. It's like, look, we understand you got there in 1973. You spend that long in politics. There is going to be some bad votes that you take, right? The crime bill, we won't excuse that. I can't cape for that. Even though I'm a supporter of Joe Biden, I supported his election, I can't cape for that, because that led to mass incarceration, right? You take the war on drugs and you take the 94 crime bill, massive ballooning in incarceration, right? And not just incarceration, but people on death row. There's a recension in policies help to curb recidivism and things like that, right? So I think though, on his record as well is like the Second Chance Act, right? In 2008, the Fair Sentencing Act as well, in 2010. Now, the plans that were on the table in terms of criminal justice, and that's kind of where I want to take it here as we get Alex in and stuff. But the plans for criminal justice are outlined this way. He wants to eliminate the federal death penalty and incentivize states to follow, right? Repeal federal mandatory minimums, reform solitary confinement, just complete overhaul of how people are treated in jail, the decriminalization of marijuana, these sort of retroactive applications of expungements, which I want to get into Alex about, because that's very lawyer-ish for me. And that's a little bit above where I am. So I want to understand what that means. Supporting ending cash bail, which we're talking about, shutting down private businesses, and then doing things to incentivize states to do the same. One thing I think is really important, and this is something that we need to check for. And during the campaigns and everything, as we're trying to get to know who the candidates were, there is a system in California called Open Justice, right? And it was enacted by Kamala Harris, where you can go into the portal, the police portal. You can see exactly, what officers' records are, right? Like, and what are the statistics in your community? So, how many times we've seen episodes of police brutality, you have that documented, right? Just the rates, right? How often people are being stopped. We can data mine that information and find out, oh, it looks like, for the same offenses, these people are getting X amount of time, and these other people are getting this much time, right? And I think that's important. I think that's important for us to see. It's important for that to be transparent. That type of transparency on the federal level will go a long way for a lot of us, right? Imagine you see an officer walking up to the vehicle and things like that. You collect the badge number and you put that into this Open Justice. You put that into that portal, And now I can see all the various offenses that this cop has made, right? I can see that. I think it's important for people to see that, right? But so far I'm not thrilled, man. I'm not thrilled. I think 2 months is a little early, but on the early assessment, I just feel like a lot of the things that were fought for, and that he was saying that he was going to fight for, it looks like he's already trying to tamp down expectations. So that to me is a little bit that's a little bit disheartening. Texas, shout out to Texas, shout out to everybody down there in the South. Huge weather fiasco down there. Colder, the coldest it's been there in the last 30 years, right? So it's unprecedented level of frost and just low temperatures. And Houston is America's fourth largest city. I don't know if you guys know that. Houston is America's fourth largest city in terms of infrastructure, right? And that brings it back to the infrastructure conversation. Because Texas is the way it is, there was no overhaul to sort of, weatherize things, right? Like we know that in some places there's more severe events, and not just like global warming it can be a reductive sort of comment, like everything is just getting hotter. But no, the global warming is supposed to bring about more catastrophic events, weather related, whether it's cold or hot, right? So in this case, we're seeing pipes burst. We're seeing people without power, at least 34 deaths right now. And to blame is the failing infrastructure, right? So there has to be investment there, even in places where, it doesn't happen here. Like, no, it can happen. It absolutely can happen. So, I was born in Houston. I have family there, and they're going through it. You know what I mean? And, it is a shame that it takes an emergency to have that investment, but shout out to the mayors and the governors that are actually doing things. Shout out to Beto. I know AOC did a big drive, $4 million to Texas to actually help pass out food and water and things like that. And big demerits for Tim Boyd and Ted Cruz. So Tim Boyd is now the former mayor of Colorado City. He comes out and he says survival of the fittest, straight up, like with his chest too, like with his soul, like survival of the fittest. This warped Charles Darwin type of Atlas shrugged, outlook on the whole situation. And to me, that's not the role of government. And the MVP of this whole thing is Ted Cruz, right? Who in a moment of just tone deafness takes his family over to Cancun. Most people cannot afford to just up and leave in that condition. $300 a night Ritz-Carlton vacation with the family while his state suffers, right? But you have to think, right? If you're that brazen, you have to already know that there's enough people that are going to vote for you. And, when the next sort of culture war comes up, because he's a culture warrior. So the next culture war comes and now he's able to get back into the good graces of people, right? So I think that all of that is important though, right? We got to see how it works out, it plays out in the South, and what the actual federal response has been. So far, it's been declared a national emergency, so a lot of supplies are going down there. But they're going to be cleaning up for a while after that. There have been floods and things of that nature, right? So I just wanted to highlight that because that to me it presents a nice juxtaposition. And again, the people who are hurt the most are our people, our Black and brown people, where infrastructure is not the best in our communities. But you guys see the flyer and everything like that. I hope people went out and saw Judas and the Black Messiah. I'm not going to give out any spoilers or anything. I do think it is very close to the source material, so we'll say that. I thought it was a very good performance. Daniel Kaluuya put up a good performance. Lakeith Stanfield as Bill O'Neill, the guy who told, right? The title kind of gives you the description of what it's going to be about. But I thought particularly what they show very well is portraying the influence of the federal government in these initiatives to break up all of these networks of people who didn't agree with where the government stood on a host of issues, from Vietnam to civil rights to policing. So what Fred Hampton was able to do was to put together these different coalitions of people who were once rivals and join them under the banner of, better policing, better programs, making things more representative for how the people felt, right? So big investigation, was sort of, it's tough to even think about something like that because Fred Hampton was 20 years old. I mean, he was a teenager at the time where his name started to become prominent in the Hoover meetings, right? And it's a young kid. So what I draw from that is that leadership doesn't, there's no age requirement to be a leader. You know, he started doing that as a teenager, and look at the level of influence, bring together different groups in Chicago, the Young Lords, the Democratic Socialists out in the college areas, you know what I mean? Rival gangs that were joined under this message of equality. So federal, the feds hated it, right? But the school lunch programs, the hospital programs and things like that. But the whole story, there's an underlying theme of criminal justice there, and the system and how the system is designed to work and who it's designed to work for. And I want to do our part to help demystify some of that. And so let me get to this donation really quick, and then we'll how did the narrative on Cuomo change so crazy? He went from leading the charge on COVID to hiding bodies. Yeah, he looks bad. He looks bad. And I'm not beholden to anybody. You're not counting the bodies that came from the nursing homes, and you're saying, oh, this is just put it into the regular count. Like, how can you have faith? You have to have faith in the institutions. So there's no use in trying to lie about something like that, right? So I think he's gonna have to come to carpet about that. And I thought that he was spiking the football a little too much for me, like mid COVID, right? Like he was, yeah, he'd done a good job and things like that. Kind of, he was ahead of the curve in a lot of ways, but it was nowhere near over. So I think, we celebrated the touchdown a little bit too much. But so we're gonna talk about criminal justice. We're gonna talk about some cases, talk about Fred Hampton and things like that. I want to go ahead and introduce Alex Avalon, who's a associate litigator. Has hold on one second. Let me make sure I get the bio. I don't want to get the bio messed up. The brother worked hard for these things. So associate litigation attorney at Chase and Lapero and Mallon and Capuzzo. Was prior to that was general counsel for the New Jersey Reentry Cooperation under Governor McGreevey. So without further ado, our special guest for today, Alex Avalon. What's up, bro?
Hey, Tony. How are you? Thanks for that intro. I don't know about all that, but
no, you will take these accolades. Like, don't. Yeah. Yeah. So Alex, I appreciate you being able to join us and things like that. The criminal justice conversation, I think, is important in light of everything that's going on. But first, can you give us a little bit about your history? What you've, how you came to study law and some of the things that you've been involved in?
Sure. Yes. For me personally, in my own narrative, I'm the son of immigrants to this country. So service and kind of giving back has always kind of been, as cliche as it sounds, has always kind of been a guiding principle to me. And I thought, when I was young, you have these kind of ideals of like what is a good profession, what you can do to like obviously pay the bills and support your family, but also kind of have a social impact. And so I thought like kind of getting into law was something I always wanted to do, because I thought it was, at least in my own community, legal representation, whether it's actually, having an attorney or having access to kind of the mechanisms of power, was something that was like severely lacking. But also like representation. I mean, I didn't see many people who came from backgrounds as me who were lawyers. So I thought that was a good platform for me to kind of get into. So
I don't want to cut your wisdom, but yeah, we missing the eyes are a little cut off on my end. Yeah. There we go.
How about now?
Yeah. Perfect. Go ahead. Yeah. Okay, continue.
Yeah, so I'd always, you talk to every attorney, they'll tell you I always wanted to be a lawyer, but that really rings true for me. I wish I knew then what I know now, and that might have changed the conversation. But so I had always wanted to kind of find that middle ground between policy and the realities of life. I need to make a living.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
So yeah, as you said, I graduated from law school. I got involved in politics. I actually had a campaign of my own. I ran for county commissioner out in New Jersey.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
we got about 43,000 votes. We lost to the Republicans by like 1.3 percentage points, so it was pretty close. But after that, I was kind of like, all right, you know, I need to build a career. I need to pay some bills. Law school is not cheap.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so I was fortunate enough to get involved with the New Jersey Reentry Corporation, which was run by It's still operating. It's run by former Governor Jim McGreevey here in New Jersey. They're across the state. We're headquartered in Jersey City. I live in Jersey City. And so that was really great work. I was obviously the general counsel, so I was like representing the corporation, but I was also tasked with kind of running the legal program. And that was basically dealing with the reentry population within New Jersey.
Reentry. Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay. People who go back, go back to jail. Okay.
Right. No. So what we were dealing with is our population mainly males. We did have a small female population, but it was reintegrating people back into society, right? Because
Okay. Okay. Right.
yeah,
Right.
there was
Right.
constant there was a constant pipeline between lack of social services, lack of resources, and our system, in theory, should be based on rehabilitation. And unfortunately, and we can get into this in further detail, it's not.
Yeah. Okay.
So we saw recidivism. So, you know, about 68% of our population did not reoffend. And I think in 2019, I'm not sure what the up-to-date data is. The national rate is like 13%. So what did we do? We focused on really the main goal was employment, was getting these guys employed, right? Getting them sustainable wages. So the temptation, right? There's so much of crime and criminal justice theory, I think, that has credibility is it's tied into poverty. It's tied into lack of resources. It's tied into lack of opportunities.
Talk that.
Yeah. So we really focused on, my legal program focused on even getting people's driver's license. When you go away, I have a lot of guys say, when you go away and you go away for 10, 15, 20 years, they take everything away from you. You become a number. So you got guys coming out of jail, reformed, paid their time, right?
Right.
Paid their debt to society, if you will.
Yeah.
And want to have a better life, and they can't even get a driver's license to drive to work.
Basic stuff.
Yeah, and this is still happening. Yeah.
Okay.
So that work really, I think, was very fulfilling for me.
So one thing, I don't want to cut you off because this is good stuff. Now your background, because some people in the chat are asking about your background, how you grew up, and things like that, like what ethnicity thing, you know what I mean? That type.
Okay, yeah. So so my dad's from Caracas, Venezuela. So he came here at like the age of 23, couldn't speak a word of English. My mother's from the Marble Hill houses, the projects in the Bronx. She's half Puerto Rican, half Cuban.
Okay.
But I was raised in suburban New Jersey. I was raised as like the token Spanish kid with white people.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting perspective.
But you have objectively and honestly, you could pass.
I get that a lot. Yes,
you can pass for. That's why I wanted people to be clear of what what's going on, and it'll make more sense as to why you do what you do now.
Yeah,
and the population you work with. So I wanted people to understand that. So Puerto Rican and
Puerto Rican, Cuban, Venezuelan.
Right on. Okay.
Yeah, and but you raise an interesting point. Like I can pass, right?
Yeah. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Law. How does that work in law? Because I mean, we know that darker people get tougher sentences. I want to talk about the sentence disparity and stuff like that you see. You know what I mean? And dead time. Like I think you were leading down that path. Let's start with dead time first.
Yeah.
I get arrested. It's a heavy crime. It's a heavy accusation, and I'm sitting in jail. Right? How long can they legally hold you in jail? Why is it that some guys spend years in jail? Years.
So what you bring up is it's such a multi-layered and complex system. right?
Okay.
Because I think the underpinnings, and I think it's important to like touch upon that, right? Like it's a form of control, right? Bail in essence is the most, I think, like clear example of how the system is made for people with money and people with wealth. Historically, if you couldn't make bond or you couldn't make bail, they can hold you from the time of your detention until you get a final verdict, right?
Wow.
So they can hold you for the entirety of, in theory and historically, they could hold you for the entirety of your legal proceedings, right?
That's crazy. But all right. First of all, why? Why is that? Why was that? Because cash bail. That's the thing, right? So everybody, just so everybody know, we're talking about basic bail. You got to pay X amount. You got to put up someone's house in order to get out, right? So, but why? How does this even happen? And what's the sort of the thinking behind it? I mean, you litigating these cases, like how does this? How do they make a distinction between who has to stay and who goes?
Yeah. So obviously, it was based. I mean, historically, it was based on socioeconomic biases as well as racial bias. I mean, there's no question about it. Racial animus played a significant role. So, what does that look like? It's the same thing as sentencing, right? You have a white American, let's say, getting charged and sentenced for, let's say, a second degree CDS, control of dangerous substance, right? That white person is going percentage and time again, is going to receive a lighter sentence than an exact same similarly situated black or brown person, Latino person. I mean, and we're talking about over 50 years of sociological studies, anthropological studies. The same thing is applicable to bail as well. Okay. So the NAACP Legal Defense Fund did a fascinating study over about 30 years and found that the very same scenarios were being played out in bail, meaning a white defendant, let's call it a defendant at this point, for the exact same crime would get lesser bail, right? They could percentage-wise pay bail and be out, but they were also they were, they did a juxtaposition between defendants who had the same essential background. Okay, so let's say no criminal background, no flight risk, and yet
Okay,
bail was denied more often, about 2/3 more often to African American or Latino defendants.
Wow. So same conditions, they got the same record. You take the name off of the profile, same person.
Right. Now,
same, but it's different.
And I'll get into how that permeates not only, I think, the most like blatant examples of a lot of the structural and systemic racism issues and socioeconomic issues in the legal system, but that permeates the entire legal system, from even the side of well-intended, well-meaning, whether it be lawyers, whether it be prosecutors, whether it even be law enforcement officials. But I'll get into that, because I think what's a critical point for people to understand also is, I mean, these are historic underpinnings, right? This is not something that happened overnight, right? What would happen in the Deep South, right? In post Reconstruction during Jim Crow, what would happen? Right? Very often, innocent people, black men, were accused of crimes against white victims, were kept in jail, and then what would happen? Vigilante justice. So, I mean, I'm a part of the system, but you can't be a part of the legal system, or you can't be, I think, part of this country and not be infuriated by those facts. But I think it's important that everyone recognize that those facts exist, because there's a lot of people who I think historically have been in denial about it. And people who are in denial hold the mechanisms of power. It's not all doom and gloom, though, right? So going back to Dead Time, I mean, another great example is the Browder story in New York.
Khalif Browder. Let's talk about it.
He innocently, was accused. He was completely exonerated, never charged with a crime for stealing a backpack. Right.
Crazy.
And because because they didn't have bail reform in New York at the time, and he was very vocal about the injustices that were going on to him, but the system clearly failed. And and tragically he ended up committing suicide after being incarcerated for 2 years. He was never charged with a crime. Let's compare that to January 6, 2021. Where we have a shaman, the QAnon shaman.
Yeah.
The
Capstone
guy with the notion.
Don't mind me drinking a drink while you talk about it.
Because
I still can't believe that.
An armed insurrectionist that caused the death of 5 people, including a Capitol police officer, right? Gets organic food sent to his cell because his mom wrote a letter to the judge.
Organic food sent to his cell. This is a guy who ran into the Capitol, took all types of selfies, broke 100 laws, and he gets organic food to his cell. Okay. Okay.
So, I mean, that's a month ago. And when you compare that to the tragedy of the Browder story, I mean, it's gut-wrenching. Now, I think it's important to, we're not exaggerating when, and I don't feel like as an attorney that I'm exaggerating in saying that's gut-wrenching, but I don't think it's all doom and gloom. So I think
what are we doing to get things better? The mass incarceration. You had the First Step Act, which is literally a first step. The Trump administration, there was some there's some bipartisan support behind that, and so, but what is that? I mean, I know what it entails and what it doesn't entail, but I would like to know what's on the table in terms of reforms, like just what you've been exposed to.
So obviously, like, as part of my background and obviously from our conversation, like, you can tell I'm of a certain political realm or like team, right? But I want to talk about this completely, like, entirely objectively.
Okay.
And so in the reentry population, reentry is one of those rare kind of bipartisan issues. However, I'm skeptical, and my skepticism is towards both realms of the political sphere, right?
Okay,
so I mean, I think on the right, I think it's a lot of people support reentry or support criminal justice reform for just that, political reasons.
Okay.
Because at the same time, those same politicians on the right are still supporting the privatized prison complex.
Right.
Which, I mean, we have by far the most lucrative, and I mean that in a negative sense, private prison complex that the world has ever seen.
The idea that is lucrative, that you could say the word lucrative with prison, how does that even how does it even work to where we got all these private prisons? And I know that's one of Biden's initiatives and stuff like that, but why is it that you could support reentry programs but support private prisons? And what is is there a pipeline there from the judges on the bench sending people to these private prisons, or what's going on with that?
No, so you see, different jurisdictions do things differently, but at least in terms of the the judiciary, in theory, should be completely independent. However, there are metrics, right? So if you're a criminal justice, if you're a criminal law judge, you're going to be evaluated on, okay, what are your conviction rates? What are your guilty verdict rates? What are your not guilty verdict rates? Are you too favorable towards the plaintiff side? Are you too are you too favorable towards defendants? And I'm of the belief that, as impartial as they try to be, that's not, they're essentially human beings. So I think the private prison complex, I don't think even I fully understand it, to be quite honest. But it's contractors. I think it goes beyond the legal system. and I think it's more of the kind of a policy. So it's between these third-party contractors and legislators and government contracts, and it's all justified in this kind of mystical sense of like, oh, economic freedom, it's capitalism, and that the government is too big and that the government should not be involved, in running all of our prisons in their entirety. They're not equipped. They don't have but what the data has shown is actually the standard of living in a lot of these private prisons are private or partially privatized prisons is tremendously lower than fully public or fully federally funded institutions.
Wow.
But I do want to go back to dead time, because I think one of the I think one of the most important things is bail reform.
Bail reform.
And New Jersey, that I have dealt with that significantly. So,
all right.
So bail reform, really, the only, at least in my experience, what I've encountered, the only metrics for keeping someone incarcerated during the course of their legal proceedings is if they pose a significant risk to the victim, to the victim's family. Not even so much a flight risk. That's sometimes thrown around, but I mean, the U.S. Marshal system is, they're good at what they do. But I mean, they also have their, they also have their roots in, the Fugitive Slave Act. So I mean, they've been around for 150 years, right?
Right.
So, but really, if someone doesn't have a criminal record, is not accused of, well, even in some cases, somewhat of a violent crime, if a defense attorney or public defender can make an argument that they are going to stay away from the victim or they're not going to pose a significant violent risk, most of the time they're going to be released, at least in the state of New Jersey. And bail reform, what bail reform has done is essentially bankrupted all the bail bond companies. But they're all underwritten by huge insurance companies. And what these companies do, what the bail bond companies do, is they operate in multi-states. So all the ones in New Jersey have gone. So really the only issue is counties or sheriff departments who issue these bonds are trying to collect against major insurance companies. I don't really see a negative in terms of impacting suspects or even victims of crime, because ultimately, if you're a victim of a crime, and the evidentiary standard is met, you're going to get your justice, right?
So let me ask you this though. Let me ask you this. Now, if I commit a crime, they just hold me in there, right? They hold me in there on dead time. I go to a private prison. Does that prison continue to get money for me being there? Like, who's making the money for me? Somebody has to be making something for me staying there, right? Like, who? What does it? What works with that? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. So that's a really good question. So basically, when you're being held, let's say you get arrested, you haven't had an initial hearing, right? You're in the county, right? That's actually a loss for the county. So in theory, at first it was pushed back a little bit when bail reform, at least in New Jersey, when it was being put before the legislature from law enforcement. But ultimately, the law enforcement has become actually very supportive of it because it makes more sense. It gives them more efficiency. And really, they're only going to keep incarcerated at the county level while the proceedings are happening. And this is before going to state. This is before getting a sentence, right? They're going to have more resources to, keep the very serious, serial killers or what have you incarcerated. Whereas historically, a nonviolent, controlled substance, you're going to spend $60,000 a year to keep someone who had a pound of weed in their car, never hurt anybody, never committed a violent act.
Crazy.
It doesn't make sense. And I think law enforcement, at least in in like Hudson County, like Jersey City, Essex County, Newark, the pretty high population urban counties have actually had positive feedback coming from law enforcement. So no one, I think, the only ones who are saying that bail reform is a bad idea, and I'm just speaking in New Jersey because it's what I've seen. You can actually see a pretty new. It's only been around about 3 years. Are the bail bond companies? Gives a shit. I mean, they were charging crazy money, defaulting on the crazy interest rates, and then defaulting anyway. So I don't really see a negative. Now to answer your question specifically, what basically happens is, my understanding is, even in like a state penitentiary, for example, a lot of the let's say like the trays to serve meals on, or the food services, those will be third partied out. So they get a certain budget. So the government gets a certain budget put aside. Okay, so if this was a completely public prison, let's say I have $100 per inmate to spend on food services. Instead of them doing it themselves, they'll go to a contractor, and the contractor will say, "I'll charge you $80." So the government gives them $80, and that $20 is a windfall. So in theory, the people that are making money are the contractors, but indirectly are also the state entities that are able to save that 20%.
Right. So then it just becomes a game. Once we get you in there, yeah, now it becomes a game. Now what about go back to the whole thing about the bail reform idea. Because as my man Daniel Levine is talking about, what about the cases where it is violent crime? How would that work then? Because you go ahead and you reform that, would you essentially be letting people who committed crimes back out into the community? How would that work?
Yeah. So the metrics, at least in the state of New Jersey, so was there actual violence committed on a victim? Right? What was the severity? The victim is entitled so it's called the initial. It's actually called a detention hearing, pre-trial detention hearing, and the victim can make an impact statement. The prosecuting attorney will almost 100% of the time say, no, this person is a risk to the community. What factors in are the background. If someone has a rap sheet, 35 pages long, and it's littered with violent offenses, assaults, domestic violence, most likely they're going to be held, or they're going to have, they're going to be detained. But because it's not bail, the court and the detention hearing judges have a wide discretion, and we've seen more. Yeah, so that's a great question. That was one of the major concerns. But without divulging too much, because I'm ethically bound.
We got it. Yeah,
I was involved in a second-degree kidnapping case, where the accused was my client. Never had a criminal background. Didn't actually commit a violent act. Threatened to. A co-defendant had a weapon. The victim made an impact statement saying that they wanted to drop the charges against my client. My client on the record, I was able to argue that my client on the record would remain 100 feet away from the alleged victim. And if he violated that, right to jail. He had no background. He had a job, education. So
right.
This is a first-degree kidnapping case. He was not detained pre-trial. His co-defendant, though, had the weapon, was kind of more what the facts showed, at least at the initial stage, and at the grand jury, was that the co-defendant was more of the aggressor. The co-defendant had spent 10 years for a violent offense. The co-defendant was detained.
Right.
So is it a perfect system? No.
Yeah.
But I think thus far how it's playing out, it's been more positive than negative. And but it kind of goes to this question though. It's kind of more of a philosophical question, right? It's is it better that one guilty person goes free as opposed to one innocent person being on death row? And that's a tough question. I'm not saying I have the answer to that.
That's, I mean, look, I just I like the fact that they're looking into, you know, the reforming the way that these things are decided, because it kind of seemed like it's like I can't understand the equation. Like, I'm a scientist. I can't, the equations don't make sense to me, Alex. They don't.
Well, one of the other issues, one of the other issues, and I've talked to people in law enforcement too. One of the other issues about dead time too is you could spend more time if you can't make bail in kind of the, let's call it like the old school regime, right? Of you know, you can't make bond, this is a bond, or you know, we're not issuing a bond, you're flight risk. You could spend more time, right? Time served than what you ultimately get sentenced with. So stealing
and that to me, that's the part that's crazy. So then, if I spent all that time in jail, then doesn't that get knocked off of whatever sentence you're going to give me, or I got to serve more time on top of that?
So you know, yeah, you in theory should be getting credited, but it doesn't make any sense, right? If you serve 2 years, let's say hypothetically, you're 2 years for, and some cases take that long. Let me tell you, some of those cases take that long. And civil, that's a whole nother thing. But you can spend 2 years for an offense that you would get 3 months for. So yeah, oh, thanks, time served, but I already spent 2 years. When if I had gotten out, or if there was bail reform, and let's say I were to get convicted, I would have only spent 3 months. So that's why now you're seeing even a lot of, I would say the vast majority, at least in states where they're considering this, of law enforcement groups, the judiciary, the defense attorney bar, the public defender, tend to be in support of bail reform, because it at least now, in places that have instituted it, is a perfect no, but it seems to be working, and it seems to be avoiding those major issues. The major issues being the inequities of who can pay, right? Who stays detained, right? And also the inequities of this kind of, you know, being credited time, but you know, oh great, thank you. You know, like it doesn't you credit me 3 months. I spent 3 years for something I didn't even do.
It's crazy. That's crazy. And let's get to this too, because the Fair Sentencing Act, that came out in 2010. And basically that was another one of these reforms going against the Reagan era war on drugs, where now we don't make distinction between powder cocaine and crack cocaine, right? In terms of sentences. Now, are they going to continue to roll out more of those measures? Because I know now marijuana is about to be legalized. I would like to know the perspective from the courts on that, on what that entails. And are we going to see you know, rates for nonviolent drug offenders, especially in marijuana? Are we expecting to see that go down for those people?
So yeah, my sense is that at least in I would say jurisdictions like, you know, New York, New Jersey, California, Oregon, that have policymakers that are kind of on the forefront of these issues, despite the there is bipartisan support for a lot of these issues, but in terms of at the state level, I haven't seen a lot of reforms actually being in.
I think the brother might have froze. Hold on a second. Let me chat. Can you guys see me? I think Alex might have frozen, so we're gonna get him back. Give me a second. Alex, if you can hear me, you're frozen. You probably want to leave the chat and come back, and then we'll plug you back in. But you're frozen right now, my friend. Shout out to all the people listening too. We're gonna try to get Alex back. Hold on one second. Let me see if he. Yeah. Now, and I see the questions and things like that. We're gonna get people up here. I just want to cover that last little part, and then we can continue on. Give me 1 second and see if we can get Alex back. Yeah, Alex is leaving the chat and coming back. And also the invite link is here. I'm dropping that in the chat so that you guys can join in, you know, whatever experience, whatever questions and things like that you guys might have. You know, we want to be able to field those, you know what I mean? And everything. So I look, I don't know everything, right? I didn't know about dead time. I didn't know brothers couldn't get their IDs back. I had no idea. About that. So I definitely want to get into that, make sure with the stream and everything, make sure everything is good. But yeah, I think it's a question that deserves some reckoning, right? If we're going to legalize marijuana, as on the federal level, what's going to happen to all the people that were selling it before? What's going to happen, right? I would think if the government wants to make money off of marijuana, why not hire the guys who are really good at selling it? I'm just saying, why not? You're going to legalize it anyway. So, but it just doesn't make any sense as it stands right now. So we're going to try to get Alex back as soon as we can. If you guys have any questions and want to come up here, you're more than welcome to do that. I want to have more of this type of discussion because I think it's important, man. It's important to see, you know, the perspective of how things are really changing in terms of our rights, right? And the disparity that still exists with the school to prison pipelines. You know, they put obstacles in your way for reentry. So that's another important aspect of this. So the stream is there. If you like to call up and things like that, we'll definitely take your questions. We're going to go ahead and get Alex back. Alex.
Hey, sorry about that.
It's all good, man. It's all good.
Falling on a budget.
Yeah. Scott.
I know said the most incredible stuff too, man.
It was.
You're gonna have to edit that.
Sure. It was Denzel in Philadelphia. It was up there. It was up there. But just to go back, you know, in terms of the disparities that still exist, the fair sentencing laws and stuff like that. Do we expect more of that? Do we expect to see more of that to close those gaps?
I would say absolutely in states that have kind of become the standard bearers. I hate to sound cynical, but I'm always skeptical of the political speak. I actually want to see action, and I think certain jurisdictions have shown that. So, for example, in New Jersey, at the end of 2020, they passed the New Jersey legislature passed obviously marijuana laws, you know, setting a framework legally that will make recreational marijuana use entirely legal, with a mandate to stop prosecuting minor weed offenses. However,
there is always a however. Go ahead. Yep.
Even though in this state they in a predominantly democratically run assembly and state senate, it took years. The assemblyman Nick Scutari had drafted this 4 years ago. They had to do it by referendum because of the political and parliamentary bullshit that goes on. And almost 70% of New Jerseyans said, no, like, you should have done this already. Do it. They didn't provide a framework for it. We don't know. At the state level, it's going to take a year or 2 years to you start seeing the dispensaries like you see in Oregon, like you see in California. However, it's such a great example of disconnects between legislators, people who make the laws, and the people who enforce them. Since that was passed, New Jersey has law enforcement has filed 6,000, not 600, 6,000 new criminal charges based on marijuana possession.
What? Usage. How is that? How, like,
even though our state law says, yeah, it's legal. We don't know how it's going to be legal.
Right.
We don't know. Okay. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it too. I mean, but like still figuring out distribution, but we're talking, I mean, look at Colorado. Colorado made $28 million on day one.
Yeah. Day one.
Day one. How are we not setting something up in a state like New Jersey? This is a state that it's mind blowing, and when New York follows suit, it's going to be the exact same shit show. But so yes, it's great that we're having legislative pushes in the right direction, but there's a lot of other things that need to be taken. How are 6,000 people being arrested for marijuana after the state legislature?
That's another one of them things.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense, you know. And then what about the fact that, and I see people line up in the chat as well. M. Salazar, we're gonna get you on soon, but you know, I think the other thing that sort of bothers me is that, crack and everything was treated a certain way, right? Reagan treated that a certain way, did law enforcement and the courts and everything, right? You got a rise now in pill use and prescription meds and things like that being abused, sold in the black market, things like that, right? Demographically, it doesn't affect black and brown people as much as suburban whites, right? Why why is a disparity there in the eyes of the law? And do you see cases like that where the sentencing for that or the outlook on that is a little bit different than in the crack and marijuana situation?
Yes. So, well, crack was a Schedule A drug because who used it? Where cocaine wasn't, because who used cocaine?
Talk about it. Yeah. We being real today. Yeah, that's why I'm glad I got you here, Al. That's why I got yeah. Yeah, that's why I got
and that's factually. What's the difference? What's the difference between crack and coke? Who used it in the 80s? Rich white club people. Where was crack an issue? Where was the crack? And I'm oversimplifying everything, but it was a mainly, black and brown
problem.
Like, so yeah, I don't even, it was a problem, but so that's by design. That was by design, right? Okay. Because they're not going to go and have a paddy wagon at Pacha, or the Hotel Gansevoort, right? Yeah. But that's how it's designed. So what's interesting though is at the same time, I mean, fentanyl, that was one of the major issues for our guys when I worked in reentry, right? It's like the way it was described to me by a drug counselor once is that it's like fentanyl is like 3 grains of sand. 4 will kill you. Wow. Three is a high. 4 will kill you. Wow. What's happening with it? But it's interesting because the conversation changed, right? When it started hitting suburban, when opioids started hitting suburban white communities, middle class communities, it was no longer a crisis. It was a crack crisis of the 80s. The Reagan, it was just say no. This was a scourge that was destroying the very fabric of American society. It became something different when it hit different communities, right? It changed into something that required sympathy, that required a policy level that expanded beyond just policing, right? So I think that's very interesting, right? It became an epidemic when it was affecting white communities,
right?
But I also want to say something too. I think the way that it's framed is wrong, because I don't think it's just. I don't think the opioid crisis is, or crisis is just the white thing. It does impact, and significantly, black and brown, lower socioeconomic communities. And I would argue even worse, because it's so the synthetic fentanyl is cheaply produced. So the cartels are producing it in a massive amount of quantities. It's easy, it's cheap, and then they're just smuggling it in or setting up the infrastructure here to make it in these synthetic labs. It's cheap. So it's kind of a volume business. So they're flooding the streets. You don't hear about that, right? You turn on the TV and it's this wonderful, but even that, right? Even the treatment, these wonderful rehab facilities that cost money, that the everyday people in the projects, everyday people on the streets, everyday people in immigrant communities, in disenfranchised communities are not getting that type of treatment, are not getting that type of the focus is still mainly on policing. But yeah, I see disparities in sentencing. I mean, I wish I had actual numbers and data for you, but I mean, even in the expungements, historically, and that's another, to go to your point about, okay, what's the reform that can actually improve a lot of these issues. Expungements were actually historically like very hard to do, and you had to meet if you had a higher than a second degree controlled substance charge, you couldn't get that expunged. Historically, it had to be very minor. So you could, you could inadvertently, for example, deliver a package, a FedEx that has 1 pound or 2 pounds of weed in it in, let's say, 1980, and you get charged for possession with the intent to distribute, and completely change your life, become a pastor, whatever, start a nonprofit, completely change your life. 30 years later, that's still following you around.
Right.
So New Jersey actually, at the end, also along with the marijuana bill, they passed a revision to the expungements, which has kind of, so you can get up to 5 expunged. Drug offenses are now considered disorderly conduct.
Oh.
So if you have a second or first degree, you can petition the court for that. If you have anything less, now automatically after 10 years, it's going to be clean from your record.
Wow. Okay.
I think it should happen automatically if it's a minor marijuana offense, but
yeah.
I mean, I do think it's a start. A lot of people now can do it online because the process was very difficult. Even if you had an expungible offense, it cost filing fees. You had to send it to the prosecuting attorney of the county that you were convicted in. You had to find all your original documents. Some people had 20, 30, 15 years. And then you were kind of at the discretion for them to review your file. I have people waiting around for expungements for 2-3 years. I had someone who couldn't get an expungement for a gun charge because they had a BB gun when they were in college, and they got caught with a BB gun, and that's illegal in New Jersey. He was Puerto Rican. He had a BB gun, and they were treating it as if he had an AK-47.
Wow.
Would that occur? I mean, would that, if he wasn't a Puerto Rican kid from Greenville, Jersey City, would he have gotten sentenced so harshly? My feeling is no. Obviously, that's anecdotal, but I think there's data to support that.
Right. All right. So I want to get people up here too. Salazar, you don't have your camera on, so I need you to turn your camera on before we get you up here. But the other people that are in the stream that want to talk, the stream is right there. The link's right there. You don't need any fancy equipment. If you got your phone, you know my rules, man. Make sure you get off the McDonald's Wi-Fi, turn it to the side. All right. Wash your face and be respectful. All right. These very simple rules that we run the show by here, Alex. All right. So I'm gonna get Salazar on to ask his question, to contribute to commentary and things like that, and then we'll keep everything rolling. Salazar, what up, bro?
What's going on, man? Can you see me?
Yeah, I can see you. All right, can you turn to the side for me, though? Can you turn the camera to the side? Or is it if it's too difficult, it's all right. It's all right. Yep, there you go. Perfect. Yep, that's much better.
All right, so I'm an attorney, and I'm also Mexican American, and I recently started a job being the assistant district attorney in my community. And I wanted to know, Alex, when are you going to run for district attorney? Because I think that prosecutors have an amazing amount of power, and we need representation in those positions.
Right on, man.
I appreciate that, and I also want to say, and I probably should have said this earlier. I mean, I have some tremendous colleagues and tremendous friends that are prosecutors, that are in law enforcement, and we have these conversations. Like, I learn a lot from them. I learn more about the inequities, I think, from them than I do, on the other side. But that's very inspiring. Because there are people, and I think representation. I think that's huge. That's so key. I mean.
Would you ever do it?
Put him on the spot, Salazar. Do it. Yeah.
How much are you offering?
I know. Well, I mean, I all the stuff that you're talking about with bail and charging decisions, and whether to keep someone in prison for 10 years versus 5 years. I mean, the prosecutor has a ton of power when it comes to that stuff. And the thing is that, you get a lot of folks that are from law enforcement taking these positions, and if that's going to be the case, then those people are going to make those decisions based on their politics and stuff. And I think that we need people from the left, representation from Black and brown people in those positions.
That's a good point.
Mm-hmm. Well, what about and now we got two lawyers here. I want to know that, like, demystify this whole public defender thing, because from when I watch the movies and when people talk, they always tell me public defenders are terrible. What is the deal with public defenders in Seinfeld voice? Alex, you could start, and then
they're great.
They're great.
Yeah. I think they're actually a lot of them are actually really good attorneys. They're a lot of them are incredible people. A lot of them have left very successful practices to fulfill their desire to have some kind of positive impact. At least in my experience, though, in big jurisdictions and very busy jurisdictions, Hudson County, New York City, Brooklyn public defender, they're overloaded.
Oh,
exactly.
They don't have a lot of resources. They have 60 cases,
right?
And they can't choose their cases. Yeah, and they have the hardest cases too.
Okay, Salazar, do you have the same type of outlook about the public defense process, the infrastructure that's there?
Yeah. So in the United States, you have a right to representation. If you can't afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you, and basically that's a constitutional right that you have. And so in all the jurisdictions across the country, they set aside a certain amount of money for people who are indigent and can't afford an attorney to give them representation. Because you don't want to go in there representing yourself. I mean, I see people trying to do that, and it's not a good idea. You have to have an attorney. I don't care.
Why doesn't it work? Why? I mean, you figure you're a smart guy. Why doesn't? What are the pitfalls here representing yourself? Like, what's the issue?
I mean, it's just, it gets really complicated, and if you've got 10 years hanging over your head, you want to make sure that you're addressing every single issue in the case. So basically, I think that they're really essential. You have to have public defenders, and the ones that I've worked with, I mean, they're like you said, they're completely overloaded with work, but the ones that I've seen do a really good job.
Okay. All right, no doubt. I appreciate that, because I a lot of this stuff I haven't had much experience in the legal system, but I do want to know about stuff so I can arm myself with this information, right, before I even go in there. So the whole thing that Alex was talking about before, the things about not being able to get your ID back, not being able to vote, and other things that are taken away. What are some of the other things that are sort of taken away from people when they come out or whatever? Like how does that even happen, that I can't get an ID? I can't get my ID. I can't get a state license. Like, why would that even be on the books?
Yeah, there's all kinds of other crazy stuff that happens. Like, for instance, if you don't pay child support, if you don't pay like a ticket or something, they'll take away your license. And to me, that's just crazy. Like, why would we take people's ability to get money or like get a job or whatever if they're not paying child support? And I'll be the first one to say, yeah, you got to pay your child support, but why are we making it into this punitive thing? I just I think it sucks.
Yeah, and that's such a great point. I mean, we had to do in terms of licenses. I mean, we had guys who went away for decades, and they come out and they've accrued $30,000 worth of municipal parking tickets.
Oh yeah,
or failure to appear. But how can they pay a parking ticket when they're incarcerated
and they're in jail?
So we had to go to municipal court. I had to develop a network of. We had to incentivize attorneys to do this pro bono, to go to municipal court and get those fees reduced. So I don't know about your jurisdiction, Salazar, but in New Jersey, you can get a time served credit for certain fees, but you have to go to court. And someone who goes out, they wouldn't know to do that.
And again, that's where you need public attorneys, whether it's a public defender or legal aid or whatever, to represent you in those kinds of things. One of the things that I've seen in the short time that I've been here is people getting stopped when they have their license revoked, and they'll do this 10 times or whatever and get 10 tickets. And it's such a burden on the courts, because you have these people coming in over and over and over. And so what we're trying to do is figure out how we can take all of those situations out of the criminal justice system. If you get a ticket for not having a license, basically let's deal with it on before it gets filed into court, because it clogs up the courts. I mean, there's so much little bullshit stuff that really clogs up the courts. And so, one of the things we're trying to do is take that out of the court system and, deal with it before it even gets filed.
Okay, so Salazar, what's your jurisdiction again? Where you say you were in practicing law?
I'm in Colorado.
Okay. Yeah. That you guys, so you guys had the marijuana reform, right? But as I had heard that the big the issue, that the thing there was that now you can shift resources over to other drugs that are more caustic in the community, right? The methamphetamines and stuff like that. Like, how is that sort of worked out in a legal standpoint now, where this thing is legalized, but you still have other crime? Like, what's been the side effect too of saying, hey, marijuana is legal?
Well, basically, and I'm relatively new, so I don't know what it was like back when we was illegal, but I very rarely see anything come across my desk that's marijuana related. They still have, like, having an open container of marijuana in their car, I guess, is illegal. And
who would do that, by the way? Who would have an open container of marijuana? Like, seal it up.
I would just close it.
Yeah, just seal it up. Preserve the freshness.
I think it's a way for them to still try to punish people. And honestly, I think that's a bogus charge. But we still do have all the heroin and meth and that kind of stuff, which is, again, really, really sad to see. But as prosecutors, again, we have the discretion to say, instead of putting you in jail for having possession for meth, let's make you go to intensive rehab therapy.
That's a great
like one of the things we'll do is, like, say, all right, I'll sentence you to 6 months in jail, but you can get day-for-day credit if you go to a rehab facility for 6 months. If you don't finish the rehab, then you got to go back to jail. But if you finish the rehab, then you can basically spend your whole jail sentence in rehab. And there's tons of money for that stuff. And so, again, we have a lot of discretion in how we deal with drug sentencing like that,
We have that too. It's called a drug court. And actually, Hudson County, Tony, has a guy. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Drug court is great. It's basically like diversionary programs for drug offenses. So it's like, okay, if you go to rehab for 30 days, I'm gonna throw the charges out. And I
exactly.
I know the judges have a lot of discretionary power, and I guess I would assume the prosecutors in drug court do as well. But that they've seen a lot of success in the Hudson County drug court, and so they're hoping to make that kind of a national model.
Okay.
Yeah,
great.
I think it's great.
Yeah, and Salazar, I would love to get more of your perspective and stuff about your specific community, and more when we have these. I certainly would want you to call up and things like that and voice your opinion. And thank you for your service to law as a person of color, as a Mexican American person. That matters. That representation matters. That absolutely does. So I salute you for that.
All right, salute to me, bro.
Yeah, man, no doubt, man. Salazar, man. That was dope. Yeah, I mean, because he has a different set of, like, things that he's dealing with and stuff like that. So I didn't see as many people sort of signed up. Some people popped in, popped out, and everything like that. So we'll probably clip this off here. But I want to maintain contact with you, Alex, because I think, this is very educational for me personally. I think it's going to help a lot of people out to see the perspective of law, of the courts, and how they work and things like that.
Absolutely.
Beyond the base questions of, hey, when I'm going somewhere and an officer stops me, right? And actually, you know what? Let's talk about it. Probable cause. The bar for probable cause is anything. I don't actually understand it. And then, what you do to, counter when an officer asks you where you're going. Because I was always taught that they don't have the right to ask you that. So what is the actual truth on that matter?
So what was taught to me was this question could save your life in a very calm way. Am I being detained or am I free to go? Because if they don't have probable cause, they'll say you're free to go. Then you just walk away. Am I being detained? They can only search. So it's all about also preserving your legal rights. So they can. So law enforcement, for the most part, and Salazar actually might correct me on this later, but they can pat you down if they suspect a weapon. So
what?
I mean, yeah. So it's there's a term for it. I think it's like it's the same theory that like they can kick down a door without a warrant if there's an emergency, right? If there's a fire going, they can kick down. But I mean, you have to visibly see it. But that has been used. So like you can say I don't consent to a search.
Okay.
And then they would have to get a warrant. However, there are examples of bad actors saying, "Oh, you don't consent to a search, but I see a bulge in your pocket, so I think you might have a weapon." And then they find drugs on you, for example.
Right.
Now, but the fact that you didn't consent, in a calm way, will preserve your legal rights later. So what'll happen is people say, you're not entitled to search me right now. I do not consent to a search, but you're still searching me, and people will get it's almost like a way of antagonizing you. And say you can't search me, and then you make an action that is interpreted as violent, and then
it's over with. It's over with.
Yeah.
I always say I do not consent to a search, but I'm not going to stop you. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
I feel like that qualifies it in a way. Like is that a way to sort of qualify it that you didn't resist the search, but you definitely didn't give consent. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. But I think that's a smart way. I mean, these are very difficult situations because all it takes is one bad actor and you've lost your life. So like I tread very carefully when and a lot of people ask me that because there are constitutional rights, there are constitutional limits to what law enforcement can do, but when those limits are when someone crosses the line, it's life or death. It's not a matter of losing property. So like I always err on the side of saying, am I being detained or am I free to go? And say in a very nice way.
And that's it. What about asking me where am I going? That question.
You don't have to answer that. You don't, if there's no probable cause, like what's the probable cause, right? You have to ask yourself. You have to ask yourself that. Really, the only you look suspicious is not going to meet, at least in my view, the evidentiary standard of probable cause to stop and harass you. With that said, that doesn't mean that that's going to end the conversation.
Doesn't mean that.
You're protecting your legal rights more often. Yeah. So I had that personal experience where asking the question, am I being detained or am I free to go, has ended in you're free to go.
Okay.
So like a lot of people who are I call them bad actors. They'll keep keeping you talking, right? Because as long as you're voluntarily talking, they can ask you whatever the hell they want. If you voluntarily say, "Oh, I'm going down to the to the bodega," or I'm going to the bar," you volunteered that information, right?
Yeah.
But if you say, "Listen, I don't consent to a search. I'm not doing anything. I'm complying, but I mean, am I being detained?" Because then there has to be probable cause. Now, will that end every scenario? in my experience, no. And when I say my experience, is people I've talked, clients, potential clients, what have you. Mm-hmm. Does it sometimes? Yes. But what's crucial to remember is even in the short term, right? If it seems like your rights are being violated, you got to play the long game and protect your legal rights.
Okay. Because you've seen things get thrown out in court, right?
But also, could potentially be the foundation of a civil suit, right? Could be the foundation of a civil rights violation. Could be the foundation of maybe a demerit for said law enforcement and get them out of the streets. Get them behind a desk so it doesn't happen to someone else.
Right.
One of the things I do want to say this though, briefly, I at least in my experience, the majority of law enforcement officers that I've encountered, I think, don't tend to be bad actors. I think the issue is when you're part of a system that protects and allows the bad actor, you are, whether you're consciously or subconsciously or intending to be, you're complicit in it. You're complicit in that. And so I think, and I've seen, it varies, but I've seen certain law enforcement mechanisms at least having that dialogue, and I think that dialogue is crucial. But at the same time, you have to think that, okay, I need to protect my legal rights here, because this, if shit hits the fan, right, and you feel like you're being attacked and you defend yourself, which I think any reasonable person thinks that that's justifiable, it's going to be your word against the word of a bad actor who's most likely than not going to be protected.
Right. Okay.
Once again, I think that question, right? Am I being detained? Because there needs to be certain level of probable cause. I think maybe the prosecutor could speak to that more. But obviously, everything you're saying can't. I know it sounds cliche. Can and will be used against you. So I also say the bare minimum. Shut up. If you're being accused of something.
You hear that? That's from a lawyer, y'all. Shut up. Some of y'all be talking way too much. Shut up.
Yeah. Shut up. Even if it's a good conversation, and it could very well be a good conversation, right? It could be someone who's not trying to necessarily screw you over, right? But, be careful.
Yeah.
People get in trouble when they say too much, and they don't protect their legal rights. And then at the end of the day, they end up getting screwed when the encounter shouldn't have happened to begin with.
Okay, I got you. Hey, Alex, man, I appreciate your time up here. I appreciate you talking to us and everything and sharing your expertise. Certainly bring you back, especially if there's another sort of case or whatever that, you know what I mean? We want to go through some sort of historical cases and stuff like that.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about Fred Hampton, man.
Yeah, see, and Fred, but all of this stuff, this conversation is the legacy of Fred Hampton. It's about education. It's about understanding how, think the landscape has changed and what, because all these things affect us, right? They affect us at root. But no, before you go, share your thoughts on Fred Hampton, like, and how that factors into how you practice law.
Well, it's about justice, right? I mean, and it's crazy to think when we were at the height of the Cold War, where our biggest enemy had nukes, right? The Soviet Union had nukes. And yet you have J. Edgar Hoover, who I think wielded way too much power, ruled over law enforcement like his own personal fiefdom, looking at Black and brown social justice movements and essentially freedom fighters as domestic terrorists, as threats to having an armed insurrection against the United States government. That to me is really mind-boggling. And when you look at, were there violent confrontations? Yes. Was it all perfect? No. But if you look at ultimately what they were fighting for, and free breakfast, right? Giving breakfast to kids. I mean, that's what the young lords were doing. I'm more familiar with the history of the young lord. People are quote unquote radicalized for a reason, and instead of looking at the reasons, they were. I mean, Fred Hampton was assassinated. I mean, there's no question about it. I think it's like it's very telling on how institutions or kind of a system views its own citizens, and I think that there's a lot of lessons to be learned from that.
Mm-hmm.
I think, optimistically, progress has been made because of that struggle, but we got a long way to go.
Got a long
And
way to go.
yeah,
That's
we got a
right.
long way to go.
That's right, man. Hey, it's good to have people like you out there representing that understand the paradigm that we're talking about. You know what I mean?
I appreciate you, having your platform and using it for good and allowing me to contribute in any small way that I can. So.
Definitely. Alex will be in touch. You know what I mean? And until then, man, stay safe. All right.
You too. Thank you so much.
All right. No doubt, man. That was Alex Avalon, associate litigator. Very well versed in what's going on in terms of community and things like that. Criminal justice is important. It's the foundation for a lot of inequities, or it can be a launch point for a lot of inequities that we see. So we have to stay vigilant. We have to understand the laws. We have to understand the constructs, right? What made the Panthers, what made Fred Hampton so powerful is that they understood it. They understood the laws. They understood how to organize, right? And make America be true to the promises that it made. And and I just want to say, for all the people who've been arrested, for the people who've been to jail and things like that, and come out with it. And I know that changes people, right? I know going to jail changes people. Reentry is tough and things like that. And for folks that are fighting cases or whatever the case might be, I hope you got something from this. I hope you understood something from this discussion. Have these discussions, have these talks, have these debates and things like that. We may not always agree, and that's okay. But what we can't lose sight of is that the goal is equality. The goal is justice. The goal is equity, right? And as far as what Fred Hampton was able to do is to bring the coalitions of people together in order to fight the systematic inequality, right? So the same things that they learned from slavery to oppress Black people, the same thing they using to oppress people who are just poor and white. And that power structure has to be understood. So that being said, that will conclude the Political Bros show. Appreciate all of you for being out here. Definitely hit me up in the comments and things like that. If you have questions or disagreements and stuff, let me know. All right. Just answer a few little questions before we get up out of here. Augie says, who did you vote for, Tony, bro? This last election, I voted for Joe Biden. I think what Trump had done, right, besides the fact that my pockets were, he was financially, he was pretty good for me, but the deregulation, the policies, the foreign policy objectives or the non-objectives, in my opinion, led to sort of instability in areas where we should not have instability, right? We rely on allies and things like that. But the America First policies in themselves, the deregulation, focusing more resources towards communities that are already okay, I think that's inherently racist, right? Because, the programs, the federal programs disproportionately help us the most, right? But we know that we are disproportionately the most targeted. The outlook on the police, strengthening the police, the military industrial complex. I'm totally against that. Biden for sure has his faults, and we'll hold his feet to the fire on criminal justice. But I think that there's strides being made in the right direction. So that's why I ended up voting for Joe Biden. All right. So as this is every no debating versus right-leaning people. Now, Destron, I wanted to get somebody that was of the right-wing persuasion up here, but I wasn't able to find anyone. If you guys know of anybody, or you yourself want to come up and debate politics and things like that, I'm more than happy to do that. But we're going to continue on. Now, for everybody, we switch it back into battle rap mode. We got DNA coming up on the Bar Show. My man Polo. It's going to be a huge talk and things like that. But visit this content. Hit us up at the Black Compass, DA Black Compass, and stuff like that. But with all that being said, Tony, bro, Black Compass Media, stay vigilant, stay safe. Happy birthday to Nina Simone, and rest in peace to Malcolm X. Both events, her life and his death, same day, 32 years apart. Tone Bro, I'm out of here. Peace.